appreciate the dialogue between academics who study this history and the media, because I think that kind of cooperation is really necessary in order to debunk some of the misinformation that is currently circulating about the Dalai Lama and the exile Tibetan community and Tibetan history. I really feel like the real question here is, why is the narrative of slavery in Tibet and also this disinformation about the Dalai Lama circulating at this point in time? But, I know I'm a historian and I love to talk about Tibetan history. And so I can, briefly say a few words about the idea of slavery in Tibet. And as a professor, I'm always teaching my students, the importance of historical context and, what terms like slavery or race or religion mean and how they're deployed at certain periods of time for certain purposes. And up until the Chinese takeover of Tibet, Tibet had its own economies, its own social structures. Yes, much of the excess wealth went into the construction of monasteries and the maintenance of those monasteries. But remember that Tibet is a huge geographic area. It's a difficult place to live. Anyone who has had the pleasure to spend some time there, like I have and many of my colleagues have, know that it really varies a lot from place to place, just like China does. You go to Sichuan, it's very different from Beijing. It's very different from Fujian. These places are not monolithic. And I think that's always important to keep in mind, because these local geographic features, especially in Tibet, and the regional social circumstances across this vast area of the plateau really determined traditionally what kind of agricultural products could be grown, how much food, came from herding sheep or yaks or the female version of that, dree, and whether or not, an estate could, for example, raise horses to be sold to China for tea, which was a major trade commodity between Tibet and China traditionally. And most importantly, in this case, of course, is who provided the labor, for all these activities. But of course, when we use the term slavery in the West, right, it's most often used in the context of the Atlantic slave trade. And this, this history is still something that we live with. The trauma of this we live with, especially in America. And it's not talked about, I think, enough in our media, but this is real. And the social justice movement here is necessary and real. And I'll come back to that point in a second. But I think
Nicole, sorry, I just have to interrupt because you've explained it in great depth, and we would like to continue, but we don't have as much time. So if we could just ask just a few key questions. So how do you think Tibetans would interpret these criticisms that have been circulating online?
Well, I mean, the Tibetans have been in the streets protesting against these criticisms, right? This is, I think, I mean, if we're going to label it criticisms, I would actually label it misinformation. I think it's a deliberate misinformation campaign. I think this, the question of why this narrative is circulating now is really important. It comes only weeks after Putin and Xi met. The actual video circulated on March 1st. The viral highly edited video to make the Dalai Lama look terrible, and I've watched that in horror, that video, was extremely edited, like for salacious content and to make it look hypersexualized. Who did that video? We still don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody knows if it was from China or not. It's not clear. But it really circulated en masse in India. That's where it started, and that's where it went viral, and that's where it spread from. So, we need to look at this from a geopolitical angle. Who stands to gain from this narrative? This narrative of slavery has been around for a long time. It was debunked in the 1990s. There's been books authenticating Tibet, answering the questions to the Chinese propaganda about slavery. There was no slavery in Tibet. There was no history of slave trade the way there was in the West in Tibet. It just doesn't exist. There's another term called miser, which the great eminent historian Tsering Shakya talks about in that BBC article that was widely circulated. So I really think the narrative has to be who is behind this misinformation campaign and why. And it's not a question that I can really answer at this point, but I think, I think your analysts, and I know I'm going to be working with some cybersecurity experts at my university to try to understand who edited this video and then who circulated it, because I think it marks a change in the geopolitical order. I don't think that this is a lot of Tibetologists have been surprised by this. I have not been surprised by it because the Dalai Lama holds so much power in the sense that he's a true world leader, a true bodhisattva of compassion. He only works for social justice. And, who stands to gain from circulating this kind of malicious content but China, and trying to, be the arbiters of world peace, which is a complete lie. It's just I really feel like this video and this misinformation, there's a lot more behind it, and I think that's also why it went viral in the way that it did.
So what are the concerns expressed by human rights groups if this misinformation continues to be circulated? What are they accusing the Chinese government of, and how has Beijing responded?
I have not seen any response in Beijing, except for that I know that this video has circulated widely in China, and that Tibetans within China are in tears about this, not because of the misinformation, but because they get to see a picture of His Holiness, which is banned in Tibet. For a decade or so, there was no pictures allowed in Tibet of the Dalai Lama. And this has been the first opportunity for many Tibetans within Tibet to actually see pictures of the Dalai Lama. So they're thrilled by the opportunity to see this. Do they believe the propaganda? Of course not. Tibetans and Tibetologists, anyone who's ever had contact with the Dalai Lama knows what a pure and kind spirit he is. And we're so lucky to have him here in our time. And, he's getting old. And the power shift is one about, his reincarnation, the politics of reincarnation, the power, who has legitimacy to control the narrative of that. China wants the Dalai Lama under their the new Dalai Lama to be recognized within China, so they can control that narrative. Remember, like, we come from the perspective with that politics and religion should be separate. Yet the Chinese Communist Party in 2005 put a rule in that they have the ultimate arbitrary right to say whether an incarnate Lama is a true incarnate Lama or not. And that is all a power play about the next Dalai Lama. What also happened in March, between the time that this original video of this long Buddha ceremony circulated, and then the viral video, which happened a month later, on April 8th, is the first evidence that I see of that video by Yin Sun, a Twitter pro-CCP, anti-Uyghur genocide, the liberation of Tibet kind of CCP propaganda Twitter person. He's the one that I saw the first evidence of this video circulating. It doesn't mean that they did it. I have no idea who did it. I have no idea who's behind it. And it was the next day that in April 9th is when it circulated in India. But, so what I do know is that
just a final word there, Nicole. We have to, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but you can just have a final word there. Yes, you can just finish your sentence.
Yes, I think a Buddhist idea called tendril, which is the dependent origination, there's many factors that make up something. So really, to get behind this question of whether or not who is behind this misinformation, we need to find out the many factors behind it, because it's not just one.
Well, Nicole Willock, thank you for sharing your views with us. A very a complex situation, but we appreciate your time in explaining it to us. Thank you.
Thank you.